Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan on this Tuesday, July 20th, 2021. And yes, I'm back here tonight. Dave Percy was feeling a bit under the weather. I said he'd be on deck here for tonight, but otherwise, hopefully he'll be back tomorrow. And if you like additional weather information, go to weather.gov/Alaska. Well, here are the weather headlines. There is a weather watch in effect for Wednesday afternoon and evening over east central areas. I'll highlight that in a moment. We continue to watch area of low pressure that'll be developing over the Gulf here tomorrow through the end of the week. It's just taking shape now around Bristol Bay. And wet and cooler weather has invaded the interior west and southwest. The rains are spreading up now almost to Anchorage, and areas to the southwest as well as west and northwest are cloudy and cooler with areas of either light to moderate rain or just showery situation with isolated storms across east central areas. And looking farther ahead here to close out the month, it still looks like areas of the north and east parts of the state will stay warm and dry here to close out July. So here is the fire weather watch in effect for Wednesday afternoon and evening due to the potential of lightning strikes from scattered thunderstorms. Air temperatures will be warm, lower 80s there for Wednesday afternoon, and any lightning strikes could increase the risk there of fire starts. So that's the reason behind that, and we'll see if it does get upgraded or not here. That won't happen until sometime overnight or early for Wednesday morning if they do decide to upgrade it to a red flag warning. So keep that in mind. Highest fire danger through Wednesday will remain along and north of the Alaska Range through the Yukon Flats. And I wanted to show you an interesting satellite image. This is NASA satellite imagery from Lake Shasta in Northern California. And this kind of highlights the situation much of the western U.S. and the lower 48 is experiencing here with the record heat waves, dry conditions. The fire season is just getting started, and these are not the kind of conditions that you want to have. A couple years ago, you can see there's the lake. The reservoir is quite full. And then off to the right there is the image from just a month ago, and you can see that is no highlight on my part using computer software. That's the way it looks from space. You're seeing kind of the bathtub ring, the drier edge of the lake bed there. As the water level has come down so much, it's only at 50% of capacity that it normally would be at this time of year. So that's just to highlight just how bad conditions are. It's the lowest levels they've seen there since the mid-70s. So that's something not good news for the western states, because we are anticipating that it's going to be a really bad fire season across the interior west here as we have yet to get into the month of August. So looking at the satellite imagery, there continues to be a weak circulation there south of Haisley, and the north end of the southeast panhandle. Temperatures have been up around 70 at Haines. However, off to the west, you see the brightening cloud tops there just south of Kodiak, and off to the south there of Sand Point. That's some upper level energy that's helping to spin up that area of low pressure that once it emerges into the Gulf, we'll see that low take shape here early tomorrow morning. Currently there is a weak circulation there around Bristol Bay at the surface, and that'll be moving eastward. There could even be a rumble of thunder, king salmon, or up there at Kodiak as this upper level low takes shape. We do have some instability aloft that could lead to some cloud-to-cloud lightning that results in some thunder. Otherwise, back up through the northwest, low pressure has tracked from the Bering Strait and will be residing over the lower Chukchi Sea for tomorrow. And it's just going to keep areas of the west coast and northwest coast there rather dreary under low cloudiness, areas of fog, and periods of rain. So on today's weather map, there's that weak circulation taking shape now over Bristol Bay that's heading east, and then the low that is crossed up into the lower Chukchi Sea. And then out toward the east, areas of sunshine have pushed temperatures into the mid-80s this afternoon at Eagle and Fort Yukon, with some isolated to scattered thunderstorms trying to pop. A little more coverage, though, in thunderstorms anticipated for tomorrow. And then as we head through the overnight, we'll continue to see that low just sitting there over the Chukchi Sea and the low crossing Kodiak Island, so that on Wednesday, rains will be picking up along especially the east side of the Kenai. Look for moderate to heavy rain at times there, and showers spreading farther north up toward the Alaska Range. with isolated to scattered storms along the Alcan border, increasing the threat for lightning strikes causing fires there, where the conditions have been warmer and drier. And then that low just continues to spin out there in the Chukchi Sea, though it will gradually, circulation will weaken heading into Thursday. And then the low in the Gulf will become the main weather feature here as we round out the week. As a frontal trough lifts northeastward, that'll push a band of rain into the southeast panhandle here, especially later Thursday and into the day on Friday. And those rains should continue into the weekend, though they should tend to wind down and become more scattered, lighter showers as we go through the weekend. Otherwise, overall, it's been a cooling trend here across southern and western parts of the state, with more widespread showers that eventually will tend to diminish and become lighter and more scattered here as we get into Thursday and on Friday. So low temperatures will be in the lower 50s in most areas along the southeast panhandle, lower to mid 50s, and that'll be the case there, lower 50s across the south central areas. Generally lower 60s with more cloud cover across the southeast panhandle, and then back through south central areas, tough to hit 60 in Anchorage. Areas west will only be in the 50s. And then lows Thursday morning, lower 50s across the southeast inner waterways, and back through south central areas, generally upper 40s to lower 50s. And temperatures might get a few degrees warmer in the afternoon, back up into the low to mid 60s from Anchorage up toward Talkeetna, maybe a 70 there at Glen Allen. And then off along the Arctic coast, cooler there, readings after being up around 80 at Prudhoe Bay. It'll get down to near 50 there tonight, but upper 30s there to Utqiagvik on over toward the northwest coast in the 40s. Highs lower 80s on Wednesday afternoon, with that instability helping to fuel those isolated to scattered storms in the east. Otherwise, only 40s along coastal areas of the Seward Peninsula. And lows Thursday morning will range from the mid-30s to lower 40s along the Arctic coast and northwest, to 50s, low and mid-50s across the Yukon Valley. Highs still could hit 83 there at Fort Yukon. Otherwise, generally in the 50s along western coastal areas, 60s elsewhere. Southwest Alaska, overnight lows around 50, mid-40s to upper 40s there along the Aleutian Chain and the Alaska Peninsula. Highs 57 tomorrow at Bethel, 56 at Aniak, and as you go up the Yukon River, maybe some 60s, lower 60s. Otherwise, Thursday morning lows will be cooler there in the west, mid and upper 40s along the west coast, YK deltas, and then mid-upper 40s along the Aleutian Chain. And high temperatures on Thursday afternoon will generally be in the 50s across southwest coastal areas. Maybe back up to around 60 or so, especially McGrath on up toward the north and east, with highs generally in the 50s along the Alaska Peninsula, and into the low and mid 50s along the Aleutian Chain. So here's a look at the temperature outlook for July 26th through the 30th. I believe that's Monday the 26th through Friday the 30th. And temperatures are expected to average above normal there across the northeast, the eastern Brooks Range, the north slope, down into the Yukon Flats, where we could see some readings again in the 80s. However, southern parts of the state are looking to be near to a bit below normal, especially in the southeast. And precipitation is expected to average a bit below normal across the northeast and east central areas, so that would keep the fire danger elevated there, whereas western areas, especially the southwest, including the Yukon Delta, will likely see precipitation average a bit above normal. So there we have it as we head toward the end of July. Overall, the areas that have been warmest all summer long continue onward, with the trend back toward cooler and wet weather along the far southwest.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, it's aviation weather time, and if you have a flight planned coming up here Wednesday into Thursday, we have a few things going on. The ridge of high pressure that brought the interior VFR conditions for an extended period of time, along with way above normal temperatures, is breaking down, shifting eastward. We are watching an area of low pressure that will develop over the western Gulf just east of Kodiak Island, causing widespread IFR conditions there and additional lower cloudiness and precipitation. Out through the west, also precipitation extends and will push inland through the interior as an area of low pressure sits over the lower Chukchi Sea after tracking from the northern Bering through the strait. So Wednesday afternoon, there could be some isolated scattered thunderstorms, especially east central areas along the Alcan border. Also IFR along the Kenai, Prince William Sound into the northern Gulf, and over a large area of the interior southwest. Also IFR conditions continue there up there around Kotzebue Sound. And then as we head through Thursday morning, look for extensive IFR conditions across part of the inner southeast panhandle, as well as much of the northern Gulf back through Cook Inlet and in through the southwest. Thursday afternoon, there could once again be some isolated scattered thunderstorms over east central areas. And then we'll continue to see areas of IFR over the northern Gulf back through Kodiak Island, southern portion of the Kenai, and into the southwest. Past conditions on Wednesday, look for IFR conditions, especially the south end of Anatuvik Pass in the morning, becoming MVFR. That'll also be the case at Adigan with IFR conditions along the south entrance early in the day. Overall, look for IFR conditions there at Lake Clark and Merrill with lower ceilings and precipitation. Also, Rainy Pass will see the same sort of scenario. As we round the Alaska range, MVFR conditions at Windy Pass at least should hold through the day Wednesday. Isabel's looking to hold on to VFR conditions. And as we get around Mentasta, there could be an isolated thunderstorm develop in the vicinity of Mentasta Pass and areas especially off to the north and northeast. Tanita should hold on to MVFR conditions, and as we get to Portage Pass, the east end should generally be IFR over Prince William Sound with MVFR, the west entrance. And finally, taking a look at the northern panhandle, we are going to expect MVFR conditions at both White and Chilkoot passes on Wednesday. Freezing levels remain above 10,000 feet along the Alcan border into northwest Canada. That's beneath the ridge of mid and upper level high pressure. Otherwise, freezing levels have are coming down across the west side of the state. Still holding up near 12,000 feet across the eastern and central Aleutians and dropping below 8,000 feet across west central areas, including the Seward Peninsula. Icing potential will generally be between 12,000 feet and a flight level of 20,000 feet across the southwest through Kodiak Island and the Kenai out into the northern Gulf, and an area of potentially below 9,000 feet, but generally 9,000 to 16,000 feet there across parts of eastern Russia into the Chukchi Sea, and then also 9,000 to 14,000 feet in the far southeast along the British Columbia coast. Look at the upper level wind pattern. We have upper level high pressure centered near the Canadian Arctic, and then we have a few different circulations, the most significant being the one developing over the Alaska Peninsula just west of Kodiak Island, and then the other one there over the lower Chukchi Sea. As we drop on down, you can see all that jet stream energy, winds in excess of 55 knots at 9,000 feet south of the Aleutians, and the Alaska Peninsula is helping to spin up that low pressure center there over the Gulf of Alaska. Meanwhile, the low circulation over the lower Chukchi Sea remains in place. And coming down to 3,000 feet, you can see the low pressure center there just to the east-northeast of Kodiak Island out over the Gulf. And on the backside of it, that will allow for some winds upwards to 35 knots across the Alaska Peninsula into the central Aleutians, which will tend to translate to a potential for some turbulence there extending out along the Alaska Peninsula into the eastern and central Aleutians, generally between the surface and 4,000 feet. And also keep in mind there could be some localized turbulence in the vicinity of some showers and thunderstorms along the Alcan border in east central areas. So that does it for your flight weather. And if you are planning to head out here this midweek, please take the time to look at the latest conditions and forecast and have a safe flight.
So that Galena flood back in 2013 was at the intersection of weather and climate. Rick, I often get questions about the difference between weather and climate. How do you distinguish between the two?
Well, that's a really good question, John. One of the analogies that I like to use the wardrobe analogy. So in my closet, in my dresser, I've got clothes appropriate for 90-degree weather and 50 below weather. That's the climate part of my wardrobe. But what I'm going to put on today, am I going to wear my Hawaiian shirt because it's going to be a hot July day, or am I going to wear my bunny boots because it's going to be 50 below? That's the weather part of my wardrobe.
You know, there's another interesting analogy. I've heard it said that climate is like your personality, whereas weather is like the mood you're in today. It's like that old John Denver song. Some days are diamonds and some days are stones. That's how weather works.
Of course, it's really a continuous range. Just as the Galena ice jam flooding was the result of a weather event, that ice jam, up against that cold spring, a climate event. So too with less impactful events. For instance, a daily record high temperature is a weather event, one day's high. But we put that in a climate context, say comparing to a century or more of individual temperatures on a given date.
So these extreme events like record high temperatures also happen on the seasonal time scale. Just in the last few years, we've had what was called a marine heat wave in the waters south of Alaska, the Gulf of Alaska and the Bering Sea. But the water temperatures in that area set new records in 2015 and 2016.
And most Alaskans are acutely aware that big wildfire seasons are becoming more and more common, most recently in 2015. And the frequency of million-acre seasons has doubled since the early 1990s.
Just this past winter, we had another event in the Bering Sea. The ice extent in the Bering was lower than it had ever been in the last 150 years. That's about as far back as the good records go. There'd never been another year like this one in the Bering with so little sea ice. That had major impacts on the communities along the west coast and the northwest coast.
So, John, what have you been hearing from folks around town about these kind of climate extremes?
I've heard from a number of people who've been here a long time that winters just aren't what they used to be. The average temperatures are higher than they were back in the 1960s and 1970s, and we just don't get the extreme cold days, the days down in the minus 50s or even the minus 60s that we used to experience in Fairbanks back in the, say, the 1960s, 1970s, and even into the 1980s.
Well, and it's not just winter either. 2016 and 2017, the summers brought unusually muggy, humid weather to Fairbanks. We're not used to thinking of that in interior Alaska, but record high humidities during the summer months. As in the winter, we've had a significant increase in freezing rain events, since about 2000. So much so that DOT has changed their road treatment strategy, and now we have the school district building in winter rain days into the calendar. And of course, we all need good weather forecasts for these high impact weather events.
We know, though, that weather forecasts are sometimes wrong just 3 or 4 days in advance. So if these weather forecasts and the models they're based on can't pick up events like freezing rain 3 or 4 days ahead, how can we believe what they say about climate for the future?
Well, that's a really good question, John. And I think the important thing to remember is that parts of the system are predictable.
So climate models can't give you weather for particular days or even for particular months or years. They actually predict averages. These are averages over periods of a decade or two, or even averages over periods of several years. So they don't give us the month-to-month information that we might want. What are they telling us about the future, though?
Well, these climate models are telling us on the decades-long time frames that warmer winters are going to become more common. We're going to have more frequent, very low sea ice years with late freeze up and early melt out. And the same will be true on Alaskan rivers. We'll have more frequent seasons when freeze up is late and break up is early.
One of the other common threads in these climate model predictions is that heavy rain events and heavy snow events will become more common in the future. That's actually a prediction that the models make for mid-latitudes as well as for high latitudes in areas like Alaska. So we can expect the heavy downpours to become heavier and the heavy winter snows to become heavier than we've been used to. They're also predicting more frequent freezing rain events, getting back to what you talked about earlier. These events that might have happened just once every year or two in the past could actually end up happening several times in a winter in the future, according to the climate models.
And it is important to remember that even in a warming world, there are still going to be seasons and years that are colder than the average, but these cold seasons will become less and less common. So, John, maybe I don't need to have those bunny boots in my closet anymore?
Well, at least you won't need to wear them as often as you did in the past.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
In our marine weather segment today, we start off with the sea ice edge, and we continue to see open water along the northwest coast. And the Arctic coast, the ice continues to slowly melt and break up. No significant movement is anticipated in the next couple of days, though a low pressure system will continue to kind of sit and spin over the lower Chukchi Sea. Aside from that, we don't expect any major changes coming up here through midweek. As far as though out in the Gulf, we're going to have an area of low pressure developing on the west end during the day Wednesday and eventually influencing the east side of the Gulf, southeast panhandle coming up here for the latter portion of the week. Winds will pick up from the south 10 to 15 knots, inner waterways 2 to 3 feet, but Lynn Canal be small craft conditions upwards to 25 knots from the south and waves 5 feet. Along the coast, we are looking at winds still starting to turn into that counterclockwise circulation, generally around 10 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet. That definitely comes into play here as we go into Thursday, as that low deepens a bit out through the western and central Gulf. It'll cause winds from the south upwards to 25 knots. Dixon entrance there with 5-foot waves, 10 knots, 2-footers, Petersburg on up toward Juneau and Skagway. Along the coast, winds will be generally southeasterly 25 to near 30 knots and waves 9 to 10 feet. Across the south central areas, winds will begin to turn, at least the north end there, out of the east 20 to 25 knots, waves running around 4 to 5 feet. And along Cook Inlet, winds will be northeasterly to north at 15 to 20 knots and waves generally a few feet. And as the low pushes out east of Kodiak Island and the Kenai there, winds will pick up off the Kenai and off of Kodiak upwards to 30 knots with waves building to 9 feet. And generally northerly winds 10 to 15 knots with waves of 3 to 5 feet in Cook Inlet. Across the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, that low pressure center will be developing impulse crossing over Kodiak Island and the southwest peninsula tonight, early Wednesday morning. Could even be a rumble of thunder with that as there's some instability aloft. And winds will generally be out of the west there on the Pacific side, 20 to 25 knots, waves 6 to 8 feet, and west to southwest, 15 to 20 knots, with 4 to 6 feet waves on the Bering side. And then as that low pressure circulation pushes east of Kodiak on Thursday, winds will be out of the north-northwest on the Pacific side there around 20 knots, waves 5 to 7 feet, and more westerly on the Bering side and waves running generally 5 feet. The eastern Aleutians will see 20 to 25 knot winds with waves of 6 to 9 feet on the Bering, or I should say on the Pacific side, 6 to 7 feet on the Bering side, and then further west of Adak, southwest winds 15 knots, waves 5 feet out toward Kiska and Shemya. And then for Thursday, westerly winds 20 to 25 knots in the eastern Aleutians, waves generally in the 5 to 6 foot range, more southwesterly west of Adak, at 25 knots and waves running about 7 feet. The east side of the Bering, St. Matthews southward, 15 to 20 knot winds from the west, waves 5 to 6 feet. Winds will be a little more northwesterly there up toward Hooper Bay at 15 knots, waves 5 feet offshore south of St. Lawrence. And then winds really come down, become more variable there near north and west of Nunavik Island. Still west-northwest 20 knots, 5-footers there at St. Paul and St. George, and westerly winds 15 knots there in Norton Sound with 3-foot waves. Along the Arctic coast, winds will be 20 to 25 knots out of the east. Not a whole lot of movement, though, anticipated with the ice there that's just off the shore. And areas more offshore flow there across the northwest coast from the east-southeast at 20 to 25 knots, waves 7 feet in the Chukchi Sea. And then winds will be out of the east 15 knots along the Arctic coast on Thursday, and turning more toward the northeast and east there off of Cape Lisburne and Point Ley with waves 3 feet or so in the lower Chukchi Sea, and onshore west to southwest winds from Kotzebue Sound down through the west side of the Seward Peninsula at 10 to 15 knots and waves 3 to 4 feet. And here we can see that low pressure area forming, crossing the Panhandle, or I should say the Alaska Peninsula to Kodiak Island overnight. There could be a rumble of thunder in some of the heavier showers, and that low will then emerge out into the Gulf east of Kodiak there on Wednesday and continue to strengthen with areas of moderate to heavy rain, especially on the east side of the Kenai. And that low will be the main feature influencing the Gulf, pushing in another round of rain up through the southeast Panhandle here for later Thursday and into Friday. Have a good night, everybody.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.